Hey guys, Will Terry here, and got a new video for you. Why won't they hire me? Before I get into that, just a quick little plug. I'm going to show you that at SVS we have a new video called Sketchbook Painting from the wonderful and marvelous Marco Bucci. And if you Google him, you will see some freaking amazing work. This guy is just incredible. And anyway, just a little quick plug there before we get going. That's it. I'm not going to waste a lot of your time. So let's dive in. Now the thing is, I've done a video sort of like this before, but I wanted to take a different angle on it, and you'll see what I mean when we get going on this. But this is a question that comes up so often, and I'm constantly asked by people that I bump into at conferences and at workshops and online and school and everywhere. Why can't I get hired? Why won't I get job offers? How do you get freelance work? Where does it come from? And I'm putting my stuff out there on the internet and no one's calling me. So let's visit that idea, okay? Before I get into that part of it, I want to talk about this cycle of development. And this is something that you can see online if you Google it. I didn't come up with this, but it totally fits. And I think it really fits this conversation. And that is the cycle of being unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. And so it's like a tongue twister if you try to figure all these out. But basically, when you're in this realm right here, you kind of start down here. Think about like when you first tried to do something like, play basketball. And, I remember when I was first shooting baskets and I was probably like 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and I could barely get the ball up to the rim, and then, like after about 50 attempts, one went in, and it's like, it just makes your day because you make one. And whether it's basketball or anything that you've tried, as soon as you start to do the thing that you're setting out to do, and here it says you don't know what you don't know, in the description, and you don't understand what it really takes. I didn't have any mechanics for shooting the basketball right. I was just kind of hucking it up there. So you don't really know what you're supposed to be going after. You don't know how to do it. And so you're unconscious about how to do it, and you're completely incompetent, okay? And we all start out when we start doing something like bowling or something, and you go into it knowing that you're going to suck, right? You go bowling with people for the first time, and well, everybody who's bowled before is going to be better than me, so there's no pressure, right? The problem comes when you get to this next one. And for a lot of people, it's for art. It's, you're in class in elementary school or junior high, and you really haven't been drawing that much. But then maybe you get a lesson or something clicks and somebody shows you something, and you're able to draw a skull or an eyeball or something. And you're like, wow, that really looks like an eyeball. And because you're conscious and you're incompetent, so basically you know what you need to do, but you have no skills yet to do it. The problem is most people don't realize that they don't have the skills at that point. And so a lot of times what'll happen is people will look at that, the thing that they did, and they'll go, I'm an artist, I'm going to be, and you are an artist, but I mean, like, I'm really good. I think I could be pro. I know that these other people in here can't draw an eyeball. Well, it's not necessarily that they can't draw an eyeball. Maybe they just haven't tried to draw one. And so because you did one, you start to think, well, and we all are like this. We want to feel good about the things that we've done. And so you go around and you look around and you start to think that, I'm gifted. I've got something that other people don't necessarily have. And then when you progress a little further to the next one here, conscious competence, you know what you should do. So you've been learning, and right, this is down here. This is where you're really learning a lot. This is the part where you really have to start putting in the work. So you know what you're supposed to be doing, and you know how you're supposed to do it, but it takes a lot of effort to get there. It takes a lot of conscious effort, and you still fail a lot of the times when you're trying to do it. So you've really learned a lot, and you're able to apply it, right? So this is a lot of times what will happen with artists, especially, is when they get to this stage, they'll go, "Wow, I really suck." Even though they're so much better than down here on this stage than those people. These people think that they're all that, And then when you get up here and you really learn what you're supposed to be doing, you're like, "Wow, I have got so far to go." And then basically the last step right here is that you're so good and you're basically unconscious because you're so good. So like you take somebody, and I like tennis, so I think of like a Roger Federer. But I mean, this applies in art as well, or otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it. But basically, Roger Federer goes out there, and he's not, they're the mechanics of a good tennis swing. There's probably like 50 things you've got to do right, and when you're learning tennis, your coach is telling you you're not doing this, you're not doing this, and so you do that, and then there's like 50 of those things, or maybe 100 of those things, and Roger's not thinking of those anymore. He's completely unconscious. It's just natural now. And when you get to that upper level like that, you're doing things that you're like, if you broke it down, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I remember learning that way back here, but I just wasn't thinking about it. It just happened. It just flowed forth." It's really fun to get to that level. And I feel like I'm starting to get into that level where I'm creating some artwork, and then I'll look back and someone will ask me to explain, what I was doing, and I start to channel the Will from many, many years ago when I was learning all those little things to put into it, and trying to figure out, like, well, how do I get the value and the shading right, and a lot of the questions that people ask me and stuff. And I really don't think about it anymore. I'm just listening to music or watching something on YouTube or something, and it's just kind of natural and just going and just working in the workflow. Okay, let's move on, and let's dig into this thing here. I kind of came up with this little spiral idea here, and I hope it works out. I kind of drew this out real quick, but let's just kind of represent. These are stages, okay, that you go through, and I want to represent, like, this whole spiral area out here is basically all the artists in the world. Let's just say that it's like every single person who is wanting, or let's say it's every person who's wanting to do freelance illustration. Okay, let's narrow it down a little bit. So this is like the universe of people like you, like me, that want to get freelance illustration work. Okay. And so I'm going to just draw kind of a little pyramid here. Maybe this one should go all the way off. And let's see. We're going to call this, let me rotate this around here. Let's just go ahead and call this work. Okay. And you could even say it's freelance. Oops. So freelance work, okay? So let's talk about, let's see, what should we do first? Let's talk about you or me or anybody as they get starting out, right? So you might have, let's see, how's this going to work out? It's not going to be perfect, but we'll just start here. This is like you in, let's say, elementary school or junior high, and you're a complete beginner. Okay. And then let's just say each one of these stages represents a different stage in your life. So let's say you're after beginner. What's a good way to call that? Let's say you're a better beginner. Okay, for lack of a better. And this isn't going to be right, perfectly right, but and then after you're a better beginner, maybe you're good, right? Okay, and then you're good. And then let's say you're competent. And after competent, you are a really good, oops, it's a really good pro. Okay. And after that, you're amazing. You're really, really good. Okay. And then after that, you are a big name. And then after that, you're famous. Okay. So who would be some examples of these people? Well, I mean, everybody knows people that are down in this area here. But as far as like people that are amazing, I have a list on the right side of my blog, which I'm not really updating anymore. I have my list of people that I think are amazing. Big name, I would say, and mostly what I'm talking about here is in the publishing world, but in the editorial world, they have their big names and famous people and things like that. For me, because I'm a children's book illustrator, I'm mostly going to be talking about illustrators in the children's book and publishing world. But animation, they have their list of the top guys and the famous guys. And same with people in fantasy art, in the fantasy realm. They have their big names as well. So you could make a list of these different worlds, and you could compartmentalize them. So I'm thinking of somebody like, a big name might be somebody in the publishing world, like a Dan Sentat. He just won the Caldecott, right? So he's a really big name. But probably like, even though he won the Caldecott, if you went into circles of people that own, have kids and have children's books and stuff, if you said, who's the current Caldecott winner for 2014, or let's see, 2015, they probably wouldn't know. But if you said, can you name a famous illustrator? Some might say like Maurice Sendak, or they might say Chris Van Allsburg. A lot of people would just naturally say Norman Rockwell, if that might be the only illustrator they know of, and a lot of times the famous people are dead, but sometimes they're still alive and they're famous. Another person that I would put up in that category might be William Joyce in the famous category. So you have these different levels of work, right, that you're working up to. And the quality of the work is definitely increasing every single step that you go through, right? And then over here on the work side, you might have something like, the type of work you're going to get. And the reason that this is a pyramid is because there's actually more work in the lower levels. So, when your grandma asks you to do her children's book, or to do a greeting card for the family, or maybe it's another relative. I'm just throwing grandma in there. It could be any relative that says, well, I know that, Susie is really good at art and really wants to do good. Maybe she could do the family Christmas card this year, and we'll pay her to do that, right? So that's a job, right? So down here at the bottom, when you're a beginner, there's actually work there, but it's not going to pay much. It could be for your church. It could be something really, something where the people know you, and the reason they're hiring you is because they know you, and because they'd rather give it to you than somebody else, even though they could easily give it to a better artist than you because you're a beginner, right? And then the next stage would be maybe a friend, and I'll just put dad's friend. Could be mom's friend. So somebody who knows your dad, or knows a relative who's seen some of your work, maybe through Facebook or something like that. And because they're a relative, they might ask their friend, hey, can you ask your daughter or your son or your nephew or your cousin or whatever if they'd be interested in doing this brochure for my work or for something that's related to their life. It could be a children's book. It could be anything. But they're going to ask you simply because they know of you from a relative or something, right? And this is all hypothetical. This is just, an idea of where work can come from. The next one might be an individual. Someone that you don't really know, that doesn't know you, but has seen your work probably online, and contacts you directly to do like a self-publishing project. So I might just put self-pub out there. And so that's just an individual, and maybe they wrote their own children's book and they've just been dying to be able to read it to their grandkids, and they want an illustrator, and so they ask you if you're willing to do it. So there's that. The next one might be you go looking for some work on a site like Elance, right? And again, I always kind of put Elance lower, but there's always that caveat where I've been told that some people have gotten some really good jobs on Elance before. So I'm not saying, again, this is just suggestions. It's not going to be 100% accurate all the time. But I think in general, I'd put Elance down there, somewhere in the middle. And then basically you're going to have like a small publisher, and then a medium publisher. And as the jobs move up this chain, this pyramid, they're better clients. They pay more. They probably have more of a professional working relationship, better terms, things like that, and you'll get treated better the farther up you go. Then you got your big publisher, and then and I'm gonna put a couple little things more on here, and that is, I would say big publisher, but I'm going to add big job, because when you could work for a Scholastic or Random House on a small project. So I did a series of books for Simon Schuster, big, huge publisher. This was maybe 10 years ago. And so it was a big publisher, but in that big publisher, it was one of their smaller projects. Even though it was 7 individual books, I don't think they were that keen on it. I mean, I don't think it was that high a profile. I know it wasn't that high a profile at the company. It was just another project, and probably on the smaller end. But then you have projects at big publishers that are really high profile, and maybe it's because of the story. Maybe the story is something that is really current, and that the publisher just really feels is going to be a real big hit based on other projects that have sold really well, or there could be a million different reasons. Another reason could be it's a really big, high-profile author, an author who's sold a ton of books. It could be a celebrity that wrote the book. But in any case, it's a big project, and they're really trusting you with it. And that's definitely not going to be a first job. It's going to go to an illustrator if you're illustrating it for someone else, for someone else's manuscript. It's going to go to probably a veteran illustrator that just is the perfect style, and that they just feel is going to do, that they just really feel confident in. And then the top one, and I'm going to put this up there, and I'm going to call it creator. And by that I mean basically you're the author illustrator. You're creating the project, or you're somebody like a Michael Dowdle who does the puzzles. And I've talked about him a bunch of times. Someone who's creating their own brand. It might be through a publisher. It might be on their own. But they're almost in charge of it. And I the reason I would talk about William Joyce again, you should look him up. I put him in this category. Is that he writes and illustrates his own books, and he just is such a high profile name. He's worked in animation. He's crossed the boundaries. He did The he did the book app, the iPad app, the Flying Books of Morris Lessmore. He did the Numberlies. He's worked on games. He's again, his pedigree is huge. I have an interview with him. I'll link it. I'll remember to link it. And basically, he's like reached godlike status in the illustration world. I don't know I don't know what more he could attain. I mean, that's the very top. Okay. So the way I see it is that all this out here, all the way around, all this space out there, that's all of us artists. We're all somewhere out there. Yet the scope of work that's being given out is actually, and maybe I'll just grab this, and I think that the work that's being given out is in this zone right here. And so what happens is, I think I'm getting like people that are somewhere, even in this zone right here where they're amazing, and they're out here, yet they're not getting work. Their work is amazing, and you got to ask yourself why. Or they're really good. A lot of times people are really good, and they're out there. They're just not in this group of getting work. Sometimes people will will email me, and they'll be good. I'll look at their work and I'll say it's pretty good. I mean, it communicates. It's good work. It's not great. And there's a huge group. There's an ever bigger group of people in that realm. And the reason that you're not getting work is many, and we can talk about some of those. But you also have to understand that there's not that many jobs, and there's that many of us. And so to get the work, I think you need to move up. And this graphic might be off. It might actually do something like this, where at the top, when you get up there, there's actually a bigger pool of really creative, talented people. I don't know if this graphic is actually accurate, but some of the reasons when I see people that are really, really good or amazing art, sometimes it's that their style is dated. And that just basically means either they're old and they haven't changed and made any adjustments. I worry about that for me. So a lot of times I think, should I be changing what I do? I had a rep one time tell me, I really think you should change your style. In fact, one time I had a rep that told me that he thought that I should use colors that are in right now, and that felt really wrong. As far as the fact that I really love color and I paint what I love. I didn't follow his advice. I mean, like if you're painting colors that are in, that means they're in because someone beat you to it. And if someone beat you to it, then you're just following. You're not gonna have any success chasing. You've got to do you. You've got to do the things that make you happy. So when I realized that, I felt really confident about not following that advice, and I'm really glad I didn't, because I started getting really good projects shortly thereafter. And so I think that would have been a real bad mistake to make changes based on what I thought was popular at the time. So style being dated, things come back around too. And so I just think, like, if you look at some of the golden age illustrators, if you were working in their specific style and you weren't changing anything, I think that would be a mistake. I think you would basically just look like you were adding on to their work. And I think people would look at it and go, well, that's odd. It just doesn't look right for this time. But I think if you put a twist on it, sometimes it can be the perfect thing, to borrow and take. Having a dated style is really a tough one, because if that's what you love, then that's a tough thing if people aren't buying it, if people aren't into it. And that's, I do think that you can make smart decisions and look at what's currently being bought and see if you can fit in there. If you can't fit into those markets in publishing, there are probably other markets, either in the fantasy realm or in the animation realm or in some other market that would dig what you're doing. Maybe, but the style one's tough because it's what you love. If it's what you love, you kind of have to chase that. But you might want to try to make some evolutionary changes to it, and try to see if there's something that you can equally love, but that's maybe changed a little bit. Some people are unfortunately hard to work with. Now, that's, if you're beginning, that's probably not going to stop anybody from working with you, because if you're beginning, nobody knows about you, and so you're gonna get a fresh start with people. But sometimes that's a reputation that people get. Sometimes people want to charge too much. So, right now, because we've moved to more of a global marketplace, I know a lot of illustrators that are turning down work simply because they're getting asked to do work from the same client that they used to work for. And this happened to me too, where you were getting work from a specific client, and then all of a sudden the fees start going lower, and you're like, what's going on? Well, in some cases those fees go lower, possibly because they don't have to pay more because they know that there's other people out there that are willing to do it for cheaper. But often, with the amount of stuff that's coming from the self-publishing world, from small companies that are starting up and competing, there's just a lot more competition out there. And so a lot of these small publishers, they're just not selling as many books. And so subsequently they have to reduce their operating costs, which means offering you less money. And that's just kind of a reality. And so if you're not willing to work for less money, sometimes you're going to lose work over that. Another one, and this is an important one, I think, is new technology. And I've talked about this before too, but I will just say that, working digitally, I feel really confident in saying this, that working digitally opens more doors. It just does. However, and this is the thing, is that the image matters more than anything else. I would say publishing rewards the established illustrator working traditionally a lot more than the beginner. So, in other words, if you're coming out right now and starting to try to get work and you're working traditionally, I personally think it's going to be harder for you to get work than it is for someone who's working digitally. That's not to say that it's not valid and it's not good work and it's not going to be really desirable to some editors down the road. But typically what I'm seeing is those editors that love traditional work are working on the bigger projects. So the projects that are more in here, actually probably more up here, and they don't care what medium you're working in. Once you get to that level, they want you. They've seen what you do, and that's all they care about. Now, at the lower levels down here, the reason that they want you to work digitally is because they don't really care about your work, unfortunately. They can use anybody else. Up here, they have a project in mind that is perfect for a specific illustrator, and they only want to work with that illustrator, or that illustrator's writing their own story and illustrating it, and it's just the perfect match, and that person is becoming a superstar doing that thing, and they don't care what way you're working. They're willing to wait longer times if it takes you longer to do traditional work. But I just see a lot of people coming out of school, and there's this resistance to working digitally. But I know a lot of clients that just will not hire you because they expect you to be able to make changes overnight sometimes. And digitally you can do it. They don't want to deal with artwork. They don't want you to have to ship artwork to them. And I've said this before too, if you're going to work traditionally, you've got to be able to send them a digital file, which is really hard for you unless you're really good at shooting the work with a digital camera, or they don't do drum scans anymore. So it's like you really you have to figure that all that technology out. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more scanning, and when you make adjustments, if it's an adjustment on a painting, it just takes so much longer than if you have a layer that you can just throw away and redo. Or one of the hardest things that for me, when I used to have to make corrections on my traditional work, was a background sky. So if I have a nice blended background sky and I have a character over it, and they want me to move that character, I have to paint that whole character out. So that's step one, is just start painting the whole character out. Then I have to build up the textures on the background and make the background look like it did before I painted that character on there. And then I have to go and paint the character again, whereas working digitally, the character's on top of that background and you just redo the character and you're done. So that's a big one right there. Another one might be that you're painfully introverted and just really you're afraid to put yourself out there. You're afraid to talk about your work. You're afraid to I don't know, maybe there's and maybe another one, this would be a different one, would be a language problem. A language barrier. It's not a problem to have a different language, right? Is that how you spell barrier? I hope it's 2 R's. But if you have a language barrier, or if you're painfully introverted, that could be a kind of a stumbling block for you to be able to communicate with art directors and stuff like that. So, I mean, like, I know a lot of people that get on Facebook and then they'll tell me they're seeing my stuff all the time and they never make any comments. They never ever say anything at all. And so you're non-existent. You're on Facebook, but nobody knows about you because you're never having conversations. So I think it's really important to put yourself out there and communicate and network. I can't say enough about that. Another one is you're not visible. So in other words, and I've told this story many times before, but a friend of mine, Brett Hellquist, worked for many years as trying to become an illustrator, and yet he just didn't have work that anybody was seeing because he was only mailing postcards. This was pre-internet. He was mailing postcards to 50 companies, 50 art directors, and that was it. And 50 is nothing, So he was doing amazing work, but nobody knew who he was. And I see a lot of people in that category too. A lot of people that have really, really good work, but they're not visible. Either they're not posting their work online enough. If you are posting your work a lot, that's another indicator. If you're constantly posting your work, and you're not getting any work, chances are you're somewhere down here. Maybe even you're good, but you're just not getting work because you're not able to really attract those bigger publishers and the jobs because you're just like all these other people out here. The circle of influence or the circle of really good people gets a lot smaller, that area, than when you're down here and there's just so many more people. So that could be another reason right there. And that was my next one. Your work isn't that great. It's hard to, there's no way that I can tell somebody that when someone shows me their work, I have some relatives, I'm not going to name names, but I have some relatives that will show me their painting or show me something that they've done and drawing, and they want me to tell them what they think about it, and I sit in a position of thinking, well, what's the best thing that I can do for this person? And that what I've really come to realize is I don't think they really want to know what my actual opinion is, because if I got into it, I think it would really frustrate them. And what they want, I think what they want when they say, what do you think of this work, is I think they're hoping that I say, I think it's really good. But if I say this is really good, then what do? They they'll go, how does that help them? I think, and so I'll usually say, oh, I like it. something like that. I try not to say, well, I love it, because I don't want to lie. I don't think it's good to give people, I don't think it's good to exaggerate the truth, but I also don't think it's good to jump on somebody or trash on somebody just to make yourself feel better or something like that. And not that would make me feel better to trash on somebody, but I think definitely some people do that. But I think that part of me thinks, well, should I with this one acquaintance, they're constantly asking me, and one of the things that I think is, should I, because they keep asking, I start to feel like, should I say, well, you haven't taken any design classes, and it's obvious that you haven't taken any color theory, and it's obvious that you haven't taken and spent much time drawing. So if you were to spend 3 to 5 years focused on nothing but drawing and composition and color and rendering and all the things that go into becoming a really good illustrator, then I think your work will really improve. And that's the answer that I really want to give. I feel like I can give it to you because you're here watching this video, and I can be honest and say, if you're not getting the work, it really does take years, and there really isn't a shortcut. I think that for many of us, the shortcut really is getting some good training, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing svslearn.com, is so that we can help people cut to the chase, and level up faster. One of the things, and I've talked about this before, that really frustrated me in going through the schooling experiences, I felt like there were bits and pieces that I got along the way, and some really good bits and pieces from some really good teachers. But I at the same time, I felt like a lot of it wasn't sewn together. And I feel like that's something that I can help people with, because of what I went through. I feel like, and also being one of the worst students and almost getting kicked out of my college program, I feel like I know what I was frustrated with and what I was missing. And that's what I feel like I can help pass on. So anyway, I hope this helps to understand, why you're not getting work, if you're not getting work, and what you need to do to get work. If you ask any professional that's up in this realm, they didn't get it in 1 year. They weren't there in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. Most of the people that are up in that upper level have been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or even longer. I don't know how old William Joyce is, but I think he's older than me. And I think he's been doing it for quite a while, because he was a guy that I was studying when I was in school. So anyway, I hope you like this video. Don't subscribe unless you want to see more like this, and like and leave a comment.